Lady Veolyra's newest bodyguard lasted exactly 8 seconds in the interview. The scent of polished crystal and imported alien flowers filled the waiting chamber as candidates from across 3-star systems sat in uneasy silence. Some wore military uniforms decorated with medals. Others carried certifications from elite security academies. All of them wanted the same position: personal bodyguard to Lady Veolyra Thorne, one of the most influential young diplomats in the Veari Commonwealth. The job paid extraordinarily well. The survival rate, according to rumor, was considerably lower. Veolyra stood behind a transparent observation wall overlooking the candidates below. Her silver-blue skin reflected the chamber's pale lighting, while golden blonde hair fell neatly over one shoulder. Beside her, a senior advisor reviewed applicant files with growing disappointment. This one failed the stress assessment. The advisor removed a profile from the display. The previous one quit after learning your travel schedule. Another file vanished. Veolyra sighed. That was before he even met me. A concerning trend. The advisor adjusted the holographic list. Perhaps your security requirements are too demanding. Perhaps the applicants are too fragile. The advisor chose not to respond. The interview process continued for most of the morning. One candidate became visibly nervous during a simulation exercise. Another refused assignments involving frontier sectors. A third appeared excellent until discovering that Veolyra frequently traveled through politically unstable regions. By noon, the candidate pool had shrunk dramatically. One applicant remains, the advisor announced. Veolyra glanced at the final file, then blinked. That cannot be correct. The profile looked remarkably unimpressive. Human, 37 years old, former Marine, independent security contractor. No aristocratic clients. No elite academy credentials. No impressive political connections. Lucas Walker, she read aloud. That is our final candidate. Apparently. Veolyra folded her arms. Bring him in. Moments later the door opened. The human entered carrying a small duffel bag over one shoulder. He looked less like a professional bodyguard and more like someone who had accidentally wandered into the wrong building. Brown hair. Gray-blue eyes. Simple dark clothing. No dramatic entrance. No attempt to impress anyone. He glanced around the room before stopping in front of the interview table. Lucas Walker? Veolyra asked. Most days. The advisor frowned immediately. Veolyra stared at him for several seconds. You are applying for a high-level diplomatic security position. That is what the advertisement said. You do not seem particularly concerned. Should I be? The advisor looked horrified. Veolyra found herself strangely amused. Do you understand the risks involved? Lucas shrugged. People occasionally dislike diplomats. That is a considerable understatement. I figured. Veolyra activated a threat simulation on the central display. Emergency scenarios filled the room. Political unrest. Dangerous environments. Hostile wildlife reports from frontier colonies. Lucas studied everything quietly. Any questions? She asked. Just one. Go ahead. Lucas pointed toward a highlighted travel route crossing several remote sectors. Do those places have decent coffee? The advisor nearly dropped his tablet. Veolyra stared at the human. For a moment, she genuinely wondered whether he understood the seriousness of the interview. Then she noticed something unusual. His heart rate remained steady. His posture remained relaxed. He was not pretending confidence. He simply was not worried. Which, somehow, seemed even stranger. By the end of the afternoon, every evaluation score had been finalized. To the advisor's horror, Lucas Walker ranked first. This makes no sense, the advisor whispered. Veolyra reviewed the results one final time. Psychological stability. Exceptional. Threat response. Exceptional. Stress resistance. Exceptional. Adaptability. Exceptional. I agree, she said. Then she approved the selection. Several floors below, Lucas received the notification on his datapad and smiled. A new job. Better pay. Interesting travel. He grabbed his bag and headed for the exit. Neither he nor Lady Veolyra realized that one very important detail had somehow been omitted from the hiring documents. Specifically, nobody had informed her where the human came from. The first thing Lady Veolyra Thorne noticed about Lucas Walker was that he completely ignored protocol. The scent of polished metal and expensive perfume filled the diplomatic shuttle as it lifted away from the capital's central spaceport. Advisors occupied the rear cabin. Security personnel monitored scanners. Every detail of the trip followed carefully planned procedures. Every detail except Lucas. The newly hired bodyguard sat near the observation window, drinking coffee from a plain metal travel mug. Not ceremonial coffee. Not imported aristocratic coffee. Just coffee. Is that permitted? One advisor finally asked. Lucas looked down at the mug. The coffee. The beverage was not included in the official travel schedule. Lucas nodded thoughtfully. That sounds like a terrible scheduling system. Veolyra looked away to hide a smile. The advisor did not appear amused. Over the next several hours, the situation became stranger. Most security professionals remained alert through visible discipline. Lucas remained alert through what looked suspiciously like relaxation. He chatted with crew members, read a maintenance manual someone had left behind, asked entirely inappropriate questions about the shuttle's engine design. Yet somehow he never missed anything. Every time a door opened, his attention shifted automatically. Every time someone entered the cabin, he noticed. Every time a communication signal arrived, he looked up before the alert sounded. By the time the shuttle reached its first destination, Veolyra found herself watching him more than the scenery. The station itself orbited a gas giant with turquoise cloud bands stretching thousands of miles across its atmosphere. Diplomatic representatives from 6 species had gathered for a trade conference. As soon as they arrived, officials surrounded Veolyra with schedules, briefings, and ceremonial obligations. Lucas followed quietly several steps behind. During a reception banquet, Veolyra finally approached him. You seem remarkably comfortable for someone attending an interstellar diplomatic summit. Lucas glanced around the enormous hall. Crystal chandeliers floated beneath vaulted ceilings. Musicians performed near decorative gardens. Ambassadors exchanged carefully measured conversations. Honestly, he said, I have seen scarier places, such as military cafeterias. Veolyra laughed before she could stop herself. Nearby guests looked startled. Lucas appeared confused by their reaction. Later that evening, after hours of meetings, Veolyra escaped onto a private observation deck overlooking the planet below. The cool air carried the faint scent of rain from atmospheric processors. She found Lucas already there. Hiding from politicians? She asked. Recovering from politicians, he corrected. For a moment, they stood quietly watching the gas giant turn beneath the stars. Then Veolyra noticed something unusual. The temperature display near the doorway showed 39 degrees Fahrenheit. Most visitors required insulated clothing under those conditions. Lucas wore the same lightweight jacket as before. Are you not cold? She asked. He glanced at the display. Not really. Not really. Feels pretty nice, actually. Veolyra stared at him. The advisor accompanying them nearly dropped his datapad. That temperature is unsuitable for extended exposure. Lucas looked genuinely surprised. Back home we call this sweater weather. Silence followed. The advisor began checking his medical scanner. Veolyra found herself studying the human again. For the second time since hiring him, she wondered if there was something important missing from his personnel file. Lucas, meanwhile, continued staring at the stars as though nothing unusual had happened at all. The smell of roasted spices filled the station concourse as Lady Veolyra Thorne moved through the crowded marketplace, surrounded by advisors, assistants, and exactly one bodyguard who appeared completely uninterested in behaving like a bodyguard. Lucas Walker walked several steps behind the group, carrying a paper cup of coffee and studying a maintenance drone that hovered near the ceiling. The diplomatic visit had entered its third day. By every measurable standard, things were proceeding smoothly. Trade agreements were advancing. Political tensions remained low. Security reports showed no significant concerns. Yet Veolyra found herself increasingly distracted by the human assigned to protect her. It was not because he seemed dangerous. Quite the opposite. He appeared far too relaxed. Earlier that morning, she had discovered him helping a cargo worker repair a damaged loading platform. Yesterday, he had spent 20 minutes explaining the difference between 5 varieties of coffee to a confused customs officer. None of it matched her expectations for a professional security contractor. Does he always behave this way? She quietly asked one of her advisors. The advisor glanced behind them. Lucas was currently attempting to convince a food vendor that adding more peppers to a meal was a reasonable life decision. Unfortunately, yes. Veolyra watched as the vendor handed him a small container filled with bright red seasoning crystals. What is that? Extremely concentrated spice extract. For cooking. For industrial food processing. Lucas sprinkled a generous amount across his lunch. The advisor looked horrified. Veolyra stared. Can humans consume that? Apparently. Several nearby aliens had stopped walking just to watch. Lucas took a bite. Chewed. nodded approvingly. Needs more. The vendor nearly dropped the container. Veolyra felt genuine concern. Should we summon medical assistance? I do not believe so. Lucas finished the meal and continued walking as though nothing unusual had happened. Hours later, during a reception held inside the station's central diplomatic hall, another strange incident occurred. A climate control malfunction caused temperatures throughout one section of the building to drop rapidly. Guests immediately relocated to warmer areas. Technicians rushed to solve the problem. Veolyra noticed Lucas standing near the affected corridor sipping coffee. You are still here, she said. Looks that way. The temperature has fallen below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Lucas glanced at a nearby display. Really? You do not seem concerned. He shrugged. I have experienced worse. How much worse? Lucas considered the question. One winter my hometown school closed because it warmed up enough for the buses to start. Veolyra stared at him. That sentence raises several questions. It usually does. For a moment neither spoke. Around them diplomats continued discussing tariffs and trade routes. Yet Veolyra found herself focused entirely on the human. Every day revealed another contradiction. Every day created another question. His reactions rarely matched those of other species. Temperatures that bothered everyone else seemed normal to him. Food considered dangerously intense became lunch. Stressful situations barely affected his pulse. It was as though the universe had built him according to a different set of instructions. As the reception continued, Veolyra quietly opened his personnel file on her datapad. She intended only to review a few details. Instead, she found herself staring at a section she had somehow overlooked. Homeworld classification data, planetary environmental metrics, hazard assessments. She frowned and made a note to examine the information more carefully later. Somewhere within those pages, she suspected, was the explanation for everything. The soft glow of a datapad illuminated Lady Veolyra Thorne's face long after the rest of the diplomatic delegation had gone to sleep. Outside her private suite, the station drifted through the darkness above the gas giant, while distant stars shimmered beyond the observation windows. The scent of imported tea filled the quiet room as she scrolled through personnel records that she should have reviewed days ago. Most of the information was routine. Training certifications, service history, security clearances. Then she reached the planetary data section. Her eyes narrowed. Atmospheric pressure, gravity levels, environmental hazards, native predators, geological instability. She reread the numbers twice. Then a third time. That cannot be correct, she whispered. The door chime interrupted her concentration. A moment later, Lucas Walker entered carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. You have a habit of skipping dinner when you work late, he said. One of the staff members seemed concerned. Veolyra stared at him. How long have you known? Lucas handed her a cup. Known what? She rotated the datapad toward him. The planetary profile of Earth filled the display. Environmental warnings stretched across the screen. Hazard classifications. Survival statistics. Historical casualty data. Lucas glanced at it and shrugged. Oh, that. Veolyra lowered the cup. That, yeah. Your planet has gravity nearly twice the Commonwealth average. Makes carrying groceries easier when you travel. Veolyra blinked. That is your response. Lucas sat in a nearby chair. Was there another question? She continued reading. Extreme weather systems. Predatory wildlife. Seismic instability. Dangerous oceans. Dangerous microorganisms. Dangerous plant life. Lucas nodded. We have a lot going on. Your oceans are dangerous? Very. Why would anyone live there? The beaches are nice. For several seconds, Veolyra simply stared at him. The human seemed completely serious. Or perhaps completely incapable of understanding why any of this was alarming. She was no longer certain which possibility concerned her more. The following morning brought another surprise. The delegation traveled to a mining facility located on the outer edge of the station. The route required crossing an industrial section exposed to unusually high gravity due to local engineering systems. Visitors were advised to limit physical activity. Several members of the delegation moved carefully through the area. Lucas barely seemed to notice. Does the gravity not affect you? Veolyra asked. A little. He adjusted a supply crate with one hand. Feels light, actually. The nearby engineer stopped walking. Light. Lucas considered the question. Comfortably familiar. The engineer looked genuinely disturbed. Veolyra found herself laughing despite her confusion. Every answer somehow created 3 new questions. Later that afternoon, she reviewed more information. Earth's classification remained displayed on her screen. The designation appeared simple. One word. Yet the implications suddenly explained everything. The cold weather. The impossible food. The calm reactions. The physical resilience. The strange confidence. She looked through the conference hall toward Lucas. He was helping a maintenance worker repair a malfunctioning service robot, while simultaneously explaining coffee preparation techniques to a curious diplomat. The human looked entirely ordinary. That, Veilira realized, might be the most remarkable thing about him. Because according to every official record she had just read, there should have been absolutely nothing ordinary about anyone who grew up on Earth. The conference center overlooked an ocean of clouds stretching thousands of miles across the gas giant below. Blue storms rolled beneath the station's transparent observation dome like slow-moving continents of light. Lady Veilira Thorne stood near the glass watching distant lightning flicker across the atmosphere, while diplomats and trade officials filled the hall behind her. The scent of exotic flowers mixed with polished metal and expensive perfumes. It should have been an impressive evening. Instead, she found herself thinking about gravity. Specifically, the fact that Lucas Walker apparently considered dangerous gravity levels normal. You are staring at the clouds again. Veilira glanced over her shoulder. Lucas approached carrying 2 cups of coffee. I have noticed humans solve many problems with caffeine. Not all problems. He handed her one of the cups. Just most of them. She accepted it. I spent part of the afternoon reviewing Earth records. Lucas immediately winced. That sounds dangerous. Why? Earth records never make us look reasonable. Veilira laughed softly. Reasonable is not the word I would choose. Together they looked out across the planet below. For several moments neither spoke. The silence felt surprisingly comfortable. Eventually Veilira activated her datapad and projected a small holographic display between them. Earth's planetary classification appeared once more. Environmental hazards filled the screen. Lucas took one look inside. There it is. You knew? Everybody from Earth knows. Veilira studied the information again. High gravity. Extreme weather. Dangerous oceans. Dangerous wildlife. You forgot dangerous plants. The plants are dangerous too? Some of them are very enthusiastic. She lowered the display. How does an entire civilization survive on a world like that? Lucas leaned against the railing. Practice. That is not an answer. It kind of is. The response frustrated her and amused her at the same time. It seemed to happen often around him. Before she could continue, a sudden mechanical alarm echoed through the observation hall. Several nearby guests looked up. Maintenance alerts flashed briefly across service panels positioned along the walls. The disturbance lasted only a few seconds before shutting off. Most people immediately returned to their conversations. Lucas did not. His eyes shifted toward the nearest service corridor. Something wrong? Veilira asked. Probably nothing. Yet he was already moving. She followed him through the crowd toward a maintenance access door. Beyond it, several technicians were examining a malfunctioning environmental control unit. One panel had overheated. Cooling systems had temporarily failed. The issue was minor, annoying rather than dangerous. The technicians seemed frustrated. Lucas spent less than 30 seconds studying the equipment before pointing toward a damaged regulator hidden behind an access conduit. Try that connection. One technician looked surprised. Another opened the panel. Moments later, the system restarted normally. The lead engineer blinked. How did you see that? Lucas shrugged. Lucky guess. Veilira watched the exchange carefully. It was not luck. She was becoming increasingly certain of that. The human noticed details other people missed. Reacted faster than expected. Adapted faster than expected. Everything about him seemed calibrated for environments far harsher than the ones surrounding them. Later that night, after the reception ended, Veilira returned to her suite and opened the planetary classification report one final time. This time she scrolled to the bottom. Her eyes stopped on a single designation highlighted in bold letters. Planetary category, Deathworld. For a long moment, she simply stared at the screen. Then she looked out the window toward the stars and thought about the human drinking coffee in temperatures that bothered everyone else, eating food that alarmed professional chefs, and solving problems as though adversity were an old friend. Suddenly, many things began making sense. The next morning, Lady Veilira Thorne woke with a single thought repeating through her mind. Deathworld. The word followed her through breakfast, through security briefings, and through an entire schedule of diplomatic meetings. Every time she looked at Lucas Walker, the classification appeared again in her memory. Deathworld. Yet the human himself seemed completely unaffected by the revelation. The scent of fresh coffee drifted through the conference center as delegates gathered for another day of negotiations. Lucas stood near a window reading local news reports on a datapad. He looked exactly the same as he had yesterday. Same relaxed posture. Same calm expression. Same habit of drinking coffee, as though it were essential life support equipment. Veolyra approached him carrying her own datapad. I have a question. Lucas looked up. That sounds serious. How many dangerous animals exist on Earth? He blinked. You are starting with a difficult one. Approximately. Lucas thought for a moment. Do you want the official list or the list people argue about online? There are multiple lists. Many. Veolyra stared at him. Lucas took another sip of coffee. Honestly, most of them are not a problem if you leave them alone. According to this report, several species can outweigh a ground vehicle. That narrows it down less than you might think. Veolyra closed her eyes briefly. Nearby advisors pretended not to listen while very obviously listening. The conversation continued throughout the morning. Every answer somehow raised additional concerns. Earth contains storms powerful enough to reshape coastlines. Regions hot enough to melt equipment. Regions cold enough to freeze exposed machinery solid. Entire ecosystems dedicated to finding creative ways to inconvenience living things. How is your species still alive? Veolyra finally asked. Lucas smiled. Stubbornness helps. By afternoon, the diplomatic delegation traveled to a resource extraction platform located several miles from the station's central hub. The facility operated in a region known for unstable environmental conditions. Local officials spent half the journey explaining safety precautions, emergency procedures, evacuation routes, structural redundancy systems. Most passengers listened carefully. Lucas spent the trip asking questions about the mining equipment. You are not worried? Veolyra asked. About what? The platform is considered hazardous. Lucas glanced through the transport window at the facility below. Looks pretty normal. One engineer nearly choked on his drink. Upon arrival, a powerful storm system rolled across the gas giant beneath them. Lightning illuminated the cloud layers thousands of feet below the platform. Warning lights activated across several exterior structures. Operations slowed temporarily while technicians evaluated conditions. Most visitors moved indoors. Lucas stepped outside onto an observation deck and watched the storm with open fascination. Veolyra eventually joined him. Wind pulled at their clothing while distant flashes illuminated the horizon. You enjoy this? She asked. It is beautiful. It is dangerous. Lucas nodded. Those things are not mutually exclusive. For a while they stood together in silence. The storm reflected in the glass around them. Finally Veolyra looked toward him. Nobody told me. Lucas glanced sideways. About what? Your world. A faint smile crossed his face. You never asked. The storm passed during the night. But something about the following morning felt different. The air inside the mining platform carried the sharp metallic scent of overworked machinery and recently repaired systems. Engineers moved through the corridors reviewing diagnostics, while diplomats prepared for the final day of negotiations. Lady Veolyra Thorne noticed that everyone seemed relieved. Everyone except Lucas Walker. The human was not worried. What are you looking at? Pressure fluctuations. Should I know what that means? Maybe nothing. He pointed towards several readings. One sensor failing is normal. 3 sensors failing in different sections at the same time is interesting. Veolyra studied the display. The numbers meant little to her. Lucas seemed to understand them instantly. You can tell that from a few lines of data? Years of experience. He closed the report. Machines usually tell you when they are unhappy. And this platform is unhappy. A little. Throughout the day, she found herself noticing things she would have ignored before. Small details. Lucas checking emergency exits whenever they entered a room. Lucas casually counting personnel during meetings. Lucas glancing towards service corridors whenever a system alert sounded. None of it looked dramatic. Yet he never stopped doing it. During an afternoon reception, a local administrator approached Veolyra carrying several documents requiring her approval. As she reviewed them, another brief alarm sounded somewhere in the facility. Most guests ignored it. Lucas immediately turned his head. Again, he muttered. What? Veolyra asked. Same section. The sensors? Yeah. The alarm stopped almost immediately. Operations continued. Conversations resumed. Yet Lucas remained thoughtful. Later, while the delegation prepared to leave, a maintenance supervisor arrived carrying a tablet. Good news, the supervisor announced. We found the issue. What was it? Lucas asked. A damaged regulator hidden behind a secondary conduit. Veolyra blinked. The same area you mentioned this morning. The supervisor nodded. Exactly. Lucas simply shrugged. Makes sense. The supervisor walked away looking impressed. Veolyra remained staring at the human. You knew? Not exactly. You predicted it. Kind of. She folded her arms. That is becoming a pattern. Lucas leaned against the observation railing overlooking the clouds below. When you spend enough time fixing problems, you start recognizing the symptoms. Veolyra watched the endless storm systems turning beneath the platform. Then she looked back at him. The realization struck her suddenly. The resilience, the awareness, the calm reactions, the ability to function comfortably in conditions other species found difficult. It was not because Lucas believed himself invincible. It was because he had grown up solving problems in an environment that constantly produced them. Earth had trained him long before any security academy ever could. For the first time, she understood that the most dangerous thing about a death world was not its predators or storms. It was the people it created. The return trip from the mining platform should have been uneventful. The diplomatic shuttle glided smoothly through the upper atmosphere, while clouds rolled beneath them in endless layers of silver and blue. Inside the passenger cabin, advisors reviewed reports. Officials discussed trade agreements. The scent of coffee drifted through the air from a service station near the rear compartment. Everything appeared normal. Yet Lady Veolyra Thorne noticed Lucas Walker remained unusually quiet. Not tense. Not nervous. Simply focused. His attention moved constantly. Window. Door. Crew station. Environmental display. Then back again. You are doing it again, she said. Lucas glanced up from his seat. Doing what? Watching everything. That is technically my job. You watch more than anyone else. A faint smile crossed his face. Occupational hazard. Before she could continue, a maintenance alert briefly flashed across one of the cabin displays. The light disappeared almost immediately. Most passengers ignored it. Lucas looked directly toward the panel. There. Veolyra followed his gaze. What? Same pattern. The sensors again? Lucas nodded slowly. One of the engineers sitting nearby overheard the conversation. We already repaired the platform issue. I know, Lucas replied. This is different. The engineer frowned. How can you tell? Lucas leaned back in his seat. Because the warning cleared too fast. The engineer looked unconvinced. The conversation ended there. Yet Veolyra noticed something. Lucas never relaxed afterward. His attention remained fixed on the environmental systems throughout the remainder of the flight. Several hours later, the delegation arrived at a remote diplomatic outpost scheduled to host the final negotiations before their return home. The station was smaller than the previous facility. Older too. Narrow corridors connected circular meeting halls overlooking open space. The scent of recycled air mixed with industrial lubricants. Everything functioned properly, at least on the surface. During the evening reception, guests gathered beneath a transparent dome where stars filled the darkness beyond. Music drifted through the hall. Conversations echoed softly between tables. Veolyra stood speaking with several trade representatives when she noticed Lucas near one of the support columns. He was not watching the crowd. He was studying the ceiling. Lucas. He looked down. Yeah. What are you looking at? Air circulation system. Veolyra blinked. Why? Because it sounds wrong. The answer was so immediate, she almost laughed. You can hear that. Kind of. Nearby guests exchanged confused looks. One technician, standing close enough to overhear, glanced upward. Everything is operating normally. Lucas nodded. Probably. You are not certain? I am never certain. He took a sip of coffee. I just pay attention when machines start acting different. The technician walked away looking skeptical. Veolyra remained beside him. Is that how humans survive on Earth? She asked. By listening to machines? Lucas smiled. Sometimes. And the rest of the time? By paying attention when things feel wrong. For a moment, she studied him in silence. Then she realized something important. The human did not possess extraordinary instincts because he came from a death world. He possessed them because he respected danger. He expected problems. He noticed small changes before they became large ones. Not because he feared them, because he had grown up learning that survival often depended on details. As the reception continued around them, Veolyra found herself watching Lucas instead of the diplomats. Every species in the room saw a bodyguard. She was beginning to see something else. Someone shaped by a difficult world who had learned to remain calm inside uncertainty. And somehow, she trusted that calm more than any security system money could buy. The final day of negotiations arrived beneath a sky filled with stars. The remote diplomatic outpost drifted quietly through space while delegates prepared for departure. The scent of fresh coffee and polished metal lingered throughout the station as crews packed equipment and finalized travel schedules. Everything seemed calm. Everything seemed ordinary. Yet Lady Valeira Thorne found herself paying attention to different things now. Not political reports. Not trade agreements. Not diplomatic strategy. She was watching Lucas Walker. The human sat near an observation window reading a maintenance manual while drinking what appeared to be his fifth cup of coffee that morning. A month ago, she would have considered the scene unremarkable. Now she found it fascinating. "You know," she said as she approached, "I have spent weeks trying to understand you." Lucas looked up from the manual. "That sounds exhausting." "It has been." He nodded sympathetically. "Sorry about that." Valeira laughed despite herself. That happened more often lately. Nearby advisors exchanged amused looks. They had noticed the change as well. The woman who once maintained perfect diplomatic composure now smiled more frequently than anyone could remember. Lucas closed the manual. "So what is the verdict? On what?" "Humans." Valeira looked out the observation window. Beyond the glass, distant stars burned against endless darkness. "I thought Deathworlders would be terrifying." "Fair assumption. I expected aggression, recklessness, constant danger." "Also fair." She folded her arms. "Instead, I hired someone who worries about air circulation systems, helps maintenance workers, and carries emergency snacks in case somebody forgets lunch." Lucas pointed toward his jacket. "Still got them." Valeira shook her head. "You are impossible." A faint smile crossed his face. "Probably." For a moment, silence settled between them. Comfortable silence. The kind that no longer required explanation. Then Valeira activated her datapad and opened the planetary profile she had spent days studying. Earth. Environmental Hazard Classification, Deathworld. The designation glowed across the screen. Lucas immediately recognized it. There it is again. I cannot stop looking at it. Most people do that for a while. She studied the file one last time. Dangerous climate. Dangerous oceans. Dangerous wildlife. Dangerous terrain. Dangerous gravity. Everything about Earth suggested a world designed to challenge survival itself. Then she looked at the human sitting beside her. Calm. Friendly. Reliable. Entirely ordinary by his own standards. And suddenly she understood something she had been missing from the beginning. The remarkable thing was not that humans survived a death world. The remarkable thing was what they became afterward. "Nobody told me," she said quietly. Lucas looked over. "About Earth. About humans." He waited. Valeira smiled. "I thought your greatest strength would be resilience." "Not a bad guess." "I was wrong." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "What is it then?" She glanced toward the station crew moving through the corridor outside. Maintenance workers. Diplomats. Technicians. People Lucas had spoken with, helped, or encouraged during their travels. "Kindness," she said. "After everything your world throws at you, somehow you still choose kindness." For once the human had no immediate joke. He simply looked out at the stars. Then a small smile appeared. "Maybe surviving difficult places teaches you to appreciate people." The departure announcement echoed softly through the station. Their journey was ending, yet neither seemed eager to leave the moment behind. Beyond the observation window, the stars remained endless. And somewhere among them drifted a world classified as one of the most dangerous places in the galaxy. A world that had produced Lucas Walker. The bodyguard she hired because he seemed ordinary. The human she trusted because he wasn't.